Alright, let me put him away in a nice little padded box. Nah, who am I kidding? I can't just leave this one sit in a little box for any length of time. We are going to dive straight into this little guy. Now, there's a lot of great things about this, but I do want to touch it up just a little bit. As you can see, there's a couple lines here that are a little bit wobbly for my liking, and then there's a couple areas that don't quite have the finish that I want to put on it. If we look real close, I can show you two really important spots that I want to focus on. Okay, so here I've maxed out the macro lens. I'm not going to worry about those surface inclusions. As I showed in the unboxing video, it's pretty hard to get rid of. But what I do want to do is improve on that area inside the eye. You can kind of see around the outer edge of it. It doesn't so much need a polish in the middle, but around the outer edge you can see that little chipping. If I flip over to the other side as well, the back side is probably not as important as the front. But if I get the light over it, see how it blows out a little bit on those edges? I want to round that off and make it a little bit of a smoother transition. On the back side, you can see that a little bit less effort was put into it. So a lot of the surface here, you can see a lot of minor scratches. But what you need to do, if you're going to work on a stone or rework a stone that someone else has worked on, you've got to eyeball those little scratches and check out the entire stone. Find the area with the worst little patch, and then you got to start from there, because we can't really just focus on one small area here. We are going to have to hit a wider area. And for me, the key spot that I saw is right there. See around the gap between the feet, how it's not glossy? It's not shooting that light straight back at our eyeballs. So that little area there is probably the only major missed spot in the entire carving, which is pretty good. And then you can see on the surface of those feet, there's a couple of those little scratches. We'll get rid of that, ignore the fingerprints. This entire surface, it is glossy, but it is a little bit undulating. Not a huge problem. It has taken a good shine. And then yeah, just the lines. So just see if I can find an area that really displays it. You can see it a little bit more on this one here, where it's a little bit undulating, and a lot more along this outer wall. The flanks of this penguin, I can smoothen out a little bit and repolish. And to do this by eye just takes time. It just takes a lot of time. You'll see each and every stage of every opal you carve. So eventually you will know what like a 200 grit resin burr is going to look like, what a 60 grit Nova point will look like, all of that kind of stuff. The more you do it, the more you'll lock it into your brain. And so I know this piece, even in the absolute worst spots like down here, we're not going to need to drop all the way down to the sintered diamond. There's no need for that. All I'm probably going to do, and this is something you can do if you're a little bit unsure, you can always just go for your highest grit and just see if it gets rid of the scratches. If it doesn't, just drop down. No harm done. I know that the 1500 is probably not going to get the job done, so I might just attack some of those areas with the 800, but I'm probably going to go with an 800 and just hit some of those areas, particularly the back, see if I can get rid of a lot of those scuffs. Another thing you can do is, you can see here a lot of these scratches are going in the vertical rotation, so with the body of the penguin. What you can do is just rotate around and work in this opposite direction, and then you'll see your scratches, and you'll be seeing if you're getting rid of those other ones or whether they're still there, or whether your horizontal scratches are even stronger, in which case you've gone too far and you want to jump back up. And just do it on a small area that you won't really see, like the base part here, which you can see has already got quite a few scratches on it. Just like when you're trying out a new cleaning product or something, you just put it in an area where you might have a bit of a reaction and you don't know how it's going to go. So let's give my new little penguin friend here a little bit of attention. Okay, because Mr. Penguin doesn't look too different, we're going to focus on the stages that I take to fix this thing. Not that it's overly broken. First off, we're going to fix up all the scratches. So what I'm doing is using a quick skim with a 1500 grit diamond resin burr. And I'm doing this just to reveal where the undulations are. So you can see here, anywhere where the glossiness is still there means I didn't reach it. I used the burr really flat, so we're just seeing all the divots everywhere, and we're also looking at the scratches still. But mostly I'm just focusing on those divots, and I'm going to mark up a lot of areas at this point, now that I know how uneven the surface is and where it's uneven. because we're just going to smoothen it out a lot. It'll help get rid of all the scratches really easily. Any kind of divot is really hard to get rid of, and you can see here I've gone at it with a permanent marker and we have highlighted a lot of areas. It looks much worse than it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to do another quick pass. This time I'm going down to the 800 because that's what I'm thinking I'm going to need to fix all of these. And you'll see once you do the quick skim, you'll get rid of a lot of that permanent marker and you'll just see the little areas where it's seeped in and hasn't been hit by the burr. Those are the areas we're really going to focus on. And to do that, we're going to give our little penguin a really good exfoliation. So the 800 grit resin, we're going to go pretty hard, create a lot of mud, and before we wash off the mud, I just decided to try and see how much diamond is floating around in that mud and whether it will have any real effect if I just load up a toothpick and start using that mud to try to work on the eye and work on that little armpit area. All you really need is a little bit of diamond in there to work away with the toothpick and you should be able to get a decent polish. You can see I'm really trying my best to just drag some across back into the armpit and work this line. And the permanent marker is disappearing, but there's not a lot of polishing getting in there, because really we should be scratching it up, and you can see the armpit there is still glossy. Overall, the stone is stripped all the way back to that 800 mark. You can see the other side I'm going to leave, and then we're going to get right into those cracks. I thought I could use a Nova resin, but it turns out even though they're smaller and I've worn a couple down, they're still not small enough to get in there. The other question you might have is, can you use the heel of the burr, so that sharp edge on the back end? And the answer to that is kind of. You can't get right in there, and we need to get right in there. Right now I'm just basically working the wall of the groove. So unfortunately that's not going to do, and you also have to be really careful that you don't crash the chuck or the collet nut. Whatever you're using, you don't want the end of that handpiece to come in contact or you'll leave some big scratches and you'll have to go backwards. So how am I going to get into these cracks? How would we do this properly? And that is where I have to go to, as much as I don't like it very much, the diamond paste will get in there, no worries. It's pretty much the ideal tool for the job. So I'm just getting a toothpick, chopping it in half. There you go. We've got 2 toothpicks. You can shape the ends as you please, but you can see I'm just going to put the diamond paste on there. I've realized that this is my coarsest one, which is unfortunate. I would have liked to go coarser, and it's also quite old. You can see when the diamond paste gets a bit old and a bit dry, it becomes a bit clumpy. So just give it a little bit of water. I just gave it a dunk, and that will rehydrate it and make it nice and usable. So we're just going to work it in there, constantly just drag more into the space that you're trying to carve up and just work it in there, just keep grinding away. It's a very slow process. Remember, it's an abrasive rather than a metal oxide where you're using more of a reaction. This isn't going to react with the surface. This is purely about those diamonds, so you have to force them up against the opal and get it to scratch away. Now after you give it a little bit of time, you'll see it becomes a little bit pasty and a little bit more white. That's a lot of that opal that you've ground away starting to mix in with that coloured diamond paste. That is exactly what you want to see, and once that happens, don't stop, just keep on going. At this coarseness, we're not getting rid of much material at all. It's really just a polishing diamond paste, so don't be too scared. Just keep going until you're 100% sure that you've gotten in there and done enough work. And then we're going to keep on working up and up. So go into a higher grit, and you can see this one is a little bit healthier for some reason. It hasn't dried out quite as much. It's typically a bit of an oil water emulsion kind of paste. So you can add a little bit of oil or you can add a little bit of water and it'll rehydrate and be half decent to use again. But this one was pretty good, so I just smear it in there, and you'll see as you're working away it will push out, and all you need to do is drag your finger back across it and just feed it back into that crack. So after you get through all your stages, you can see now the areas that I've worked with that diamond paste and the areas that I haven't. You can see that the armpit there is super glossy, whereas the body of the penguin is still at that lower grit diamond resin burr kind of mark. And then we can finish that main part off. Now there's a lot of ways you could do this. So here I'm just demonstrating that you could go with the cerium oxide. Will work pretty good. It is one of my favorite things to do. So you're just working away, getting that cerium oxide, don't wash it off, just leave it on there, use your felt burr. Push pretty hard up against it. Here I'm just getting that point into the armpit as well to kind of blend it all together. This will get a better finish than the diamond paste unless you go to the really high grit diamond paste, and even then, because of the chemical reaction with the cerium oxide and the opal, you'll still get a better result with the cerium oxide, just because it's less of an abrasive and more of a chemical reaction with a little bit of abrasiveness to just move the material on once it does decide to come off the surface. But you can get a nano level finish on a piece of opal with the cerium oxide if you do it well enough. And of course you could use aluminium oxide or some other metal oxide as well. Any of them will work. But the other thing is, we just use diamond paste on the armpits, so you can actually just straight up use diamond paste on the entire surface as well. When you're using the green on the armpits, just use the green on the surface and just go up like you would any other kind of diamond burr. If you're using the novas or whatever, it's the same idea, just go higher and higher grit, smaller and smaller scratches. And this way you're keeping in line with what you do in those cracks and crevices. All those fine details, work those first. I do suggest working those first and then blending it all over with the same diamond paste on the greater part of the material as well. And it will all blend in nicely and you'll get a nice even finish. You can see over time, eventually you do start ripping up a lot of the opal and your little paste will start becoming a lot more cloudier with the removed opal. I never really wash this stuff off. All I do is add a little bit of water, which makes it go a little bit frothy, but that's okay. And you'll notice there's a lot of fibers of the felt burr. The felt burrs do get chewed up by the diamonds pretty quickly. Much more quickly than if you're using a wooden dowel, which is another option when it comes to using diamond paste. And it does work pretty well. But in this case, I just went with felt. I forgot how quickly it degrades, but it works out pretty well. Mr. Penguin has had a pretty long surgery, but is finally through on the other side. And let's just discuss how it went. Well, what an adventure that was. Mr. Penguin is now post-operation recovery. He's gonna wake up pretty groggy and feeling pretty sore. He was on the operating table for, I don't know, probably about 2 hours of active work. A lot of skin grafts, I would say, so he can just chill out and have a rest. Now, there were a few things that I wanted to talk about. Most of it would have been covered in the process. I just wanted to say it was a really good opportunity to just show off all of the options. We went with the diamond resins. I almost had to whip out the novas because we almost fell short. And if you zoom in here, you can see that one of my most worn nova points, where the metal is just about to come poking through somewhere along here, even though it's worn, it's still not going to a really sharp point, so it didn't actually get into the nooks and crannies much better than what my fairly fresh diamond resin point would. So unfortunately that was not overly useful, but that's okay because I showed you we had backup methods. So right here, diamond paste, toothpicks, super effective, gets into the cracks. Sometimes the toothpicks are a little bit too small, so I always cut them back to over here somewhere, or you get a chopstick, and if you can get the really nice round chopsticks, actually I've got one sitting right here. If you get these nice really round chopsticks, you can actually just use a knife and whittle it away and carve it into the exact size that you want. That'll help you get the best contact. And I do prefer the wood to the felt. You would have seen in that footage, the felt does degrade super quickly, because remember, when we're doing something like a metal oxide, the Alox or the Ceox, particularly with the Ceox, we're not using it as an abrasive as much as we are that chemical reaction with the silica material itself. Whereas in the case of diamond paste, we are purely relying on that abrasive nature. And when you put it on felt, the felt does really degrade quite quickly in comparison to the actual material that you're carving away. But it does work, it's fine. You can get a really nice mirror polish as long as you go up to a high enough grit. Now I've got high grit, but I don't really have low grit. I would have liked to have gone lower than this. This would sit somewhere around the 2000 grit mark. I would have liked to go a little bit further back because there were some areas where if I went a little bit further back, I could have reshaped. I did decide though not to whip out the sintered diamond burrs to fix up the edges and stuff. I thought that is what Jono did. All I'm doing is just a tiny bit of repolishing in areas, mostly the back. So I didn't want to change the shape at all. I want to keep it true to what he actually carved for his first one, for his early carvings, because we'll be able to track it and see how much better he gets over time. Even though we've got video recordings of it, I do still want to keep the final piece exactly the same, just shinier overall, with less scratches on it. The other option you can do instead of going with this felt is I made a video a long time ago on how to make these. So when I use diamond paste and I'm doing it across a larger amount of surface area, kind of like I did with the felt, I could have also subbed it out and just gone with the wooden dowel mounted on the mandrel. That's just a screw mandrel screwed into the bottom of it. And then all you do is rough that up with sandpaper so that you get a little bit more of this sticking in it. and it does bind a little bit better and wears a lot hardier than what the felt does. You can see that felt burr is already getting low, and I've only used that fresh with this diamond paste on that penguin. So yeah, felt does struggle quite a bit. Now, I talked about how we didn't work on any of the lines, even though that some of them were a little bit wobbly rather than being a nice smooth line. And I just wanted to show one thing that if I did do it, I would have talked about. When you're doing the original shaping with an electroplated burr or a sintered diamond burr, so this one here, it's actually worse with the electroplated burrs. And that's because the diamonds on the surface stick out a lot more than what they do on sintered diamonds. So the actual friction due to the rotation is huge. Now, one way to avoid, or at least that I've found, to minimize the amount of wobble in a straight line or a curved line, is you've got two options. So option one is that you have the burr going in this direction and rotating around, and you follow the line. Now, sometimes that means you're just holding the stone like this, and some people like to just push along and then just trace that line. The problem with that is that as this is rotating, it is going to want to move the stone away from you. So you're constantly fighting to keep it on that line, and that causes a little bit of wobble. So you end up trembling all the way along the line, and then you get that wobbly line. If instead you go with option 2 and you keep yourself perpendicular to the line that you're trying to carve, your rotation will actually help pull the stone along that line. Now, you still want to resist that because that's how you're going to get the grinding action, but now your wobble, if you're fighting it, is just going to be along that line. This is something you don't need to worry about when you're just drawing the line onto the stone, but when you're actually carving it, you do want to avoid wobbling off the line too much. And I find that if I'm trying to do it this way and just trace the line like this, I will constantly be fighting, and it'll keep going backwards and forwards, and I'll end up getting a real rough line. So I now try, a lot of the time I won't use a burr of this shape. I'll typically go with something that's a lot more rounded, not a pointy one. The point doesn't really help you. You want a nice rounded edge that just traces along this line in this direction, and you use that rotation to help you stay on line. Just something to think about. I don't know if it's just working for me, but I found it is a major problem if I do try to go with option 1, I end up with a really wobbly line. And on carvings where you're trying to do a straight line, or whether you're just trying to chase a little crack or a ginger whisker or something, I always find that trying to follow it like this is a recipe for disaster, and I just end up left, right, all over the place. So give it a try. I mean, it might work for you, but I always say just stay as perpendicular to that line that you're trying to follow as humanly possible. That's the only thing I didn't manage to cover while doing this, because I didn't end up having to change those lines at all. But there's no rest for the wicked. I talked to Jono before I was doing this, and he was talking about in those kind of cracks and crevices, how he couldn't really get in there that well, and that's because he doesn't actually have diamond paste. And he asked me where I can get decent diamond paste for a reasonable price. I had a scan online and I was actually shocked. I didn't realise how expensive the diamond paste was in Australia, so for Jono and for anyone else that's after it, I am going to hunt down a manufacturer. I've already found one that's been making it for more than 20 years, so pretty reliable. I'll probably just get a bunch mass produced and chuck it up on the store as well. Why not? I didn't realise the options were so limited and so expensive, at least here in Australia. So I'll try to fix that one. Good luck, have fun, stay safe, keep carving, and hopefully you come across some gems. Or carve me up a penguin. You're almost guaranteed I'll buy it. So good luck, see you in the next one.